Well, the left and the mainstream media are losing their minds, to say the least, over President Trump not conceding the election to Joe Biden. And here's just an example of some of the things they're saying. Donald Trump's refusal to concede is no joke. It's a dangerous precedent. The law really doesn't have much to say about that, but let's actually check in with someone who knows a thing or two about the law. Let's ask Heritage Foundation legal fellow and manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative, Hans von Spakovsky. Hans, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Hey, Hans, I mentioned this during the break to you. Speak slowly so the liberals can understand what the reality is.
Well, I'm excited to have you because I think that there's a lot of confusion out there about what the president needs to do, about what his rights are in this situation to concede or not to concede, and even what the law does or doesn't say about conceding. Can you shed some light on this for us?
Well, there's no law that requires a candidate to concede. And if it's dangerous what he's done, look, it's only been 2 weeks since the election. Most states have not even certified the results yet. And I seem to recall Al Gore, it took him 37 days, right? More than twice as long to do this. We still have a recount going on in Georgia. We have potential recount in Wisconsin and other states. And like I said, until the election has actually been certified, even then, that's when candidates often file litigation contesting the official outcome of the race.
You know, Hans, people on the left, and especially folks in the media, keep saying that the president's team is making these baseless allegations without actual examples of fraud. It's funny, by the way, because I love the fact that Nancy Pelosi talked about this. We played this clip the other day on Twitter. She talked about it after the 2016. The election was rigged. Stacey Abrams, the sort of everybody's darling in Georgia on the left, hasn't actually conceded her race in Georgia from 2 years ago because she says it was stolen. The New York Times did a whole story on fraud. Elizabeth Warren, as we pointed out yesterday in this show, signed a letter with Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota talking about the need to look into voting machines. But they don't seem to, when Republicans lose, then there's no fraud. So you're the expert. Are there actual examples of fraud, and where can I see them?
Well, quite apart from fraud, just think about the fact that in the recount in Georgia, we just discovered that in 3 counties there were votes that didn't get counted. Yeah. And then we have allegations, for example, in Nevada that individuals who aren't actually Nevada residents, but, for example, reside in California, may have crossed the line, registered, and voted in the state. So we need to look at that. Plus, look, we don't really know whether there were problems in Philadelphia and in Detroit with the way they were counting the ballots. We don't know if election officials there were actually verifying that absentee ballots coming in complied with state law before they counted them. Why? Well, because they locked out observers so they couldn't see what happened there. I mean, when you combine all of these potential issues, the president is litigating and raising those, and all of that needs to be thoroughly investigated.
Yeah. You talk about Georgia there. just today, over 3,000 more ballots were uncovered. That's in addition to the 2,600 that were already found. So that's over 5,600 ballots that now have been uncovered. These were found on a missing memory card. So is that considered fraud? Can you help us understand truly what is the definition of fraud here? Because does that fall under it?
Well, we don't know if that was fraud or whether it was just a mistake by election officials. And what folks have to realize is sometimes it can be a combination of both errors and mistakes made by election officials, plus potential fraud that compromises the outcome of the election. And that's why all of these claims need to be investigated. Particularly, for example, we also have claims, sworn testimony, by an individual who said that she saw envelopes being backdated in order to count. And that's something that has to be looked at, because that may mean absentee ballots were counted that were already received past the deadline for absentee ballot.
I want to go back to what I was asking you before, Hanso, and I'm being serious about this because I know you and the work that you've done at Heritage, you've actually documented this stuff, haven't you? And then my point is that when the Washington Post or the New York Times says that without any evidence, it makes it sound like there's nothing to substantiate these claims. But you and all the work that you've done at the Heritage Foundation, does, correct me if I'm wrong, substantiate that there have been instances of fraud, because they seem to minimize it as if this is some sort of right-wing conspiracy.
Yeah, well, look, just this summer, a judge had to overturn the election in Paterson, New Jersey, the municipal election there, because of absentee ballot fraud. And they charged 4 locals with fraud. Just 2 years ago, they weren't denying that fraud occurs, the major media, because remember, in North Carolina, the 9th congressional district got overturned. And there it was a consultant actually working for a Republican candidate who was criminally charged, along with 6 of his staffers, for tampering with absentee ballots and illegal vote harvesting. And suddenly they were doing front page stories about that. They seem to have forgotten those incidents of fraud that have occurred in recent elections.
Well, I think part of it isn't that they forget. It depends where it occurred. So if a Republican wins a race, well, then we need to look into this because there's probably some kind of irregularity or problem or whatever. But if a Democrat wins, well, there's no Russian collusion when a Democrat wins, is there?
No. By the way, you just showed our database. We're now over 1,300 because we just added 4 more proven cases of fraud.
Wow.
So can I, I'm sorry, I just, go ahead, Lindsay.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like when I hear the media say that it doesn't exist, that is a false statement, right?
Yes, that is a false statement.
Yeah. Real quick, we only have about 30 seconds left, Hans, so I don't want to crush you here. But what are the time constraints? Because a lot of these things take time. We're in recounts right now. What are the time constraints specifically that the campaign needs to be worried about?
Well, the biggest time constraint is December 14th. December 14th is when the Electoral College meet. By then, outcomes have to be determined in states so they know which set of electors, whether it's the Democratic ones or the Republicans, get to go to the Electoral College meeting in each state house. So that's really the deadline.
All right. Hans, it's so good to have you to shed some light on these things. We'll have to have you back soon because as these things continue to unfold every day, more ballots and issues being found. Thanks for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well,